So basically, if you ask me what it's all about, I would say it is tongue-in-cheek, and it's not to be taken too seriously.
If you ask, in 1991, Freddie Mercury held onto a secret that would later shock the world. He was dying. Despite his weakening body, his powerful voice remained untouched. 4 years, the Queen frontman kept his illness hidden, revealing little even to his closest friends. When he filmed his final music video, it was done in black and white, an intentional choice to conceal how sick he truly was. In his last days, he stopped all treatments except painkillers. Then, just 24 hours after he publicly revealed his condition, Freddie Mercury was gone. Today, we look back at what really happened in the final chapter of Freddie's remarkable life. Born Farrokh Bulsara on September 5, 1946, in Stone Town, Zanzibar, Freddie came from a Parsi family with roots in India. His parents, Bomi and Bulsara, were devout followers of the Zoroastrian religion, which traced back to ancient Persia. The family hailed from Bulsar, now called Valsad, in the Indian state of Gujarat. Even as a child, Freddie stood out. He was born with 4 extra teeth, something he believed later gave him his wide vocal range, spanning from deep bass to soaring soprano. As Zanzibar was under British rule at the time of his birth, Freddie was automatically a British subject, a small but crucial detail that would later open doors that changed the course of his life. When Freddie was 6, his sister Kashmira was born. In 1969, just as his fame was beginning to rise, he officially became a citizen of the United Kingdom and colonies. His early life in Zanzibar was peaceful and privileged. His father worked as a cashier in the British Colonial High Court, a job that granted the Bulsaras special status. While most struggled, Freddie's family lived comfortably. He first attended school at a missionary-run institution led by Anglican nuns, where he was introduced to British-style education. However, all of this changed in 1964, when a violent revolution erupted in Zanzibar. Thousands of Arabs and South Asians were targeted and killed. The Bulsaras fled, leaving everything behind to escape to England. Freddie was just 17. Life transformed overnight from tropical paradise to cold, gray exile in a suburb called Feltham. Yet, the real story of Freddie's transformation had already begun years earlier. At age 8, he was sent to St. Peter's School in Panchgani, India, a strict British-style boarding school nestled in the hills outside Mumbai. There, students wore uniforms, followed rules, and spoke proper English. It was at St. Peter's that Freddie's musical journey took off. Noticing his talent, the headmaster urged his parents to pay extra for piano lessons. That decision unlocked something powerful. Freddie quickly mastered piano, but also excelled in sports, painting, and acting. Quiet but never invisible, he earned the nickname Bucky due to his prominent teeth. At 12, he won the school's award for Best All-Rounder, a title that summed him up perfectly. Freddie's first taste of performance came through music. While at St. Peter's, he joined a band called the Hectics, alongside 4 other boys: Bruce, Derek, Farong, and Victory. They performed covers of Elvis Presley, Cliff Richard, and Little Richard. Freddie played the piano and occasionally sang. His ability to mimic melodies just by hearing them stunned people. His fingers danced effortlessly across the keys, and at school events, their band became a sensation. Students screamed and danced, giving Freddie his first taste of stardom. But his influences didn't stop at rock. He also admired Bollywood icons like Lata Mangeshkar and Kishore Kumar, whose emotional, theatrical styles would later shape Queen's dramatic sound. In 1964, Freddie returned to Zanzibar just before the revolution erupted. His world collapsed overnight. As violence tore through the island, the Bulsaras had no choice but to flee again. Their new life in England was not glamorous. They ended up in Feltham, a dull suburb far from London's bright lights. For someone who once lived among palm trees and turquoise waters, everything felt foreign and gray. But in that silence, something inside Freddie began to stir. After finishing school, he enrolled at Isleworth Polytechnic, then moved on to Ealing Art College. That's where the magic truly began. Ealing wasn't just a school, it was a playground for misfits, artists, and dreamers. Freddie found his tribe. Though he studied graphic design, his heart beat for music. He met Tim Staffel, a fellow student and musician. They clicked immediately. Freddie helped publish an underground magazine that mocked the design world he was expected to join, hinting that he already had one foot outside the door. Outside school, he fell in love with Jimi Hendrix's raw, electrifying presence. Freddie didn't just listen, he sketched Hendrix, studied his moves, and soaked in his energy. He didn't just want to sing, he wanted to dominate the stage. That obsession drove him to join a band called Ibex in 1969. They weren't famous, they played pubs and shared cramped flats, but Freddie was content. He was experimenting, failing, learning, and growing. He drew inspiration from Aretha Franklin, John Lennon, Elvis Presley, and the Beatles. His musical mind was a blender mixing soul, glam, and rock. At the same time, he was working with Roger Taylor at Kensington Market, selling second-hand clothes. That job did more than pay the bills, it gave Freddie a sense of fashion and flair. He learned what caught attention. Gradually, he started transforming from Farrokh Bulsara into Freddie Mercury. At just 22, everything began to change. After finishing art school, he met the band Ibex in August 1969. Though they had barely played a handful of gigs, Freddie saw potential, and they saw it in him. In just 10 days, he memorized all their songs, added some of his own, and traveled with them to Bolton. There, at the Octagon Theatre, he performed live on stage for the first time. The crowd didn't know it yet, but they were witnessing the birth of a legend. Freddie didn't just sing, he performed. He moved, dazzled, and owned the stage. One band member later said, "We used to just play and not worry about putting on a show." But Freddie changed all that. Despite only owning one shirt and a single pair of trousers, Freddie walked like a rock star. By October, he convinced the band to change their name. Ibex became Wreckage. Freddie began writing more music, collaborating with guitarist Mike Burson on songs like Vagabond Outcast, FWA, and Green, the latter of which was recorded in Freddie's London flat and would later resurface. But Wreckage didn't last. After the band broke up, Freddie briefly joined another group called Sour Milk Sea. That project also dissolved, but Freddie wasn't deterred. He was thinking bigger. He once told his former bandmates, "We're not going to make it playing all this three-chord blues crap. We have to write our own songs." It was the beginning of something extraordinary, a shift that would soon lead to the birth of Queen and a legacy that would change music forever. On March 29, 1970, Tim Staffel quit his band. That band was Smile, which included Brian May and Roger Taylor. Tim had been friends with Freddie Mercury since art college. They first met in 1965. When Tim left, Freddie didn't waste time, he stepped in. It felt like destiny. Smile already had talent, but Freddie brought something else, something magnetic. He had the voice, the vision, and the confidence. Even before he joined, he'd attend their gigs and suggest ways they could improve. At first, Brian and Roger weren't sure. Roger later said, "He was just my crazy mate, not a singer, just someone who was always up for fun." But that changed quickly. Freddie had been waiting for this, and once he was in, there was no going back. He pushed the band to be more dramatic, more theatrical. He wanted boldness in everything from stage presence to costumes. Then, he suggested a new name, Queen. It sounded grand, royal. Brian and Roger hesitated, thinking it might be too much, but Freddie stood firm. He said it was perfect, universal, strong, and yes, even a little provocative. Around the same time, he changed his name to Mercury. This wasn't just a new band, it was a full-blown reinvention. But they still weren't complete. They needed a bassist, and that was tricky. Several came and went until, in 1971, they met John Deacon. Just 19 years old, quiet, a student, not flashy like the others. But he showed up to rehearsal with his bass and a custom-built amp, which would help shape Queen's future sound. He played smoothly, stayed humble, and didn't demand attention. The band liked that. They brought him in, and Queen was finally whole. Freddie's influence went even further. He didn't just rename the band, he designed the logo too. Using what he'd learned in art school, he created a crest featuring lions, for Roger and John, a crab, for Brian, and fairies, for himself, all based on their zodiac signs. He wrapped it around a large letter Q, crowned and topped with a phoenix. It looked royal, fitting for a band meant to rule the stage. Their first album didn't come easy. They recorded at Trident Studios, where legends like the Beatles had worked, but Queen wasn't big yet. They only got studio time in the dead of night, after everyone else had finished. They waited around for hours, then recorded until morning. It was exhausting. After months of work, the album was delayed. Finally, it was released in July 1973 to mixed reviews. Some people got it, most didn't. But Queen didn't care. They believed they were building something that would last. In 1974, they were still searching for their sound. Early albums were talented but scattered, too long, too complex, too experimental. That changed with sheer heart attack. This was the moment Freddie Mercury stopped experimenting and started owning his sound. He tightened the songs, added drama, brought in glamour, and made every track feel huge, even the short ones. Then came Killer Queen. It exploded in the UK, crossed into America, and Queen finally broke through. But behind the scenes, life was rough. The band was broke. Their label, Trident Studios, kept most of the money. The band got paid like part-timers. They had hits but lived in terrible flats, Freddie in a damp apartment, and John Deacon couldn't even secure a home loan. That's when they snapped. After months of legal battles, they broke free, but at a cost. They gave up future royalties and paid out hundreds of thousands. The timing was risky. Right after breaking free, they decided to make their most expensive album yet, A Night at the Opera. It wasn't just a record, it was a last-ditch effort. They used 7 studios, burned more money than any British band before, and bet everything on its success. It had to work. The pressure was massive. Freddie, bold as ever, came in with a 6-minute monster, Bohemian Rhapsody. It had no chorus. It was operatic madness. No one thought it would work. But Freddie wasn't asking, he was telling. He shot a cheap, striking video in one day and pushed it out. The song stayed at #1 for 9 weeks. It changed pop music forever. On stage, Freddie became something else. He wasn't just singing, he was commanding, performing like a man possessed. His voice reached wild highs and soulful lows. That broken mic stand he accidentally snapped, he turned it into a signature prop. By the time he performed Bohemian Rhapsody live, fans weren't just watching, they were witnessing a showman in full bloom. Then came a moment in 1977 at Bingley Hall. After the band finished playing, the crowd spontaneously started singing You'll Never Walk Alone. It was unplanned. Freddie turned to Brian and said, "We need songs for this." That moment inspired We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions, 2 of the greatest stadium anthems ever. Freddie was no longer just performing, he was creating songs meant for fans to scream back at him. And they did, every night. By 1980, when Another One Bites the Dust dropped, Queen had moved far from their glam rock roots. The song was funky, edgy, unexpected, and it became their biggest U.S. hit. People doubted they could pull it off. But they did. Freddie never stayed in one lane. He kept evolving, which is why his music kept reaching new people. With success came indulgence. Freddie didn't save, he spent. If he liked it, he bought it. If his sister needed a kitchen, she got one. If a jewelry shop was closed, he had it opened. His birthday party in Ibiza was chaos. 700 guests, a cake modeled after God's cathedral, and hundreds of shattered glasses. Freddie didn't just live large, he lived loud. But not everything he touched turned to gold. In 1984, Queen played Sun City in South Africa during apartheid. It was legal, but highly controversial. Most artists boycotted the region. Queen went anyway. They claimed it wasn't political, but the backlash was brutal. They were fined, blacklisted, and condemned in protest songs. Years later, they admitted it might have been a mistake. They said it wasn't about money, but the damage was done. Still, Freddie kept chasing the new. In 1980, that chase led to a film soundtrack for Flash Gordon. It wasn't a full rock album. Only a few tracks had lyrics. Brian May handled most of it, diving into synthesizers, a new frontier for the band. Fans were confused. Some thought the music outshone the film, others didn't get it at all. But the project hinted at something bigger. Queen was shifting. Not everyone would follow, but Freddie was always moving forward. Just 2 years after their massive success, Queen veered drastically off course with the release of Hot Space. The album was drenched in disco, funk, and synths, far from the sound fans remembered. John Deacon and Freddie Mercury were enthusiastic about this new direction, but Brian May and Roger Taylor were not. The tension within the band was obvious, and the damage it caused was real. Long nights recording in Munich turned into long fights. Everyone drank too much. Brian admitted they were emotionally wrecked, while Roger blamed Freddie's manager, Paul Prenter, for steering the band into gay club music. To many fans, Hot Space wasn't just a bad album, it felt like betrayal. But while some fans turned away, others were paying close attention. Michael Jackson was one of them, taking notes. Though Hot Space flopped commercially, its influence quietly spread through the music industry. Amid this chaos, something magical happened. Queen met David Bowie in a studio in Switzerland. What began as a casual jam session turned into the creation of Under Pressure. That iconic bass line was pure Deacon, while the energy of the track was an electrifying clash of Mercury and Bowie. The two clashed constantly in the studio, but their tension sparked brilliance. The song soared to #1 and reminded the world that Queen could still deliver surprises, even as they were falling apart behind the scenes. By 1983, the band desperately needed a break. Years of recording, touring, and internal conflict had burned them out. For the first time since they started, Queen hit pause. But the break didn't fix everything. The band was still divided. Freddie and Deacon wanted more dance, while Brian and Roger clung to rock. Freddie's loyalty to Prenter only made things worse. Still, that silence gave them time to reflect on who they were and who they could still become. Then came the works in 1984. It was the reset they needed. Freddie brought his signature flair, Deacon added rhythm, and Brian and Roger got their guitars back. The sound struck a new balance, rock and pop in harmony. Radio GAGA exploded. I Want to Break Free became an anthem. Queen was back and stayed on the charts for nearly 2 years. But not everyone was on board. The video for I Want to Break Free, featuring the band in drag, was a hit in the UK, but MTV in the US didn't get the joke. The video was banned, and when Freddie wore the costume on stage in Rio, the crowd threw objects at him. Queen never fully recovered their American fanbase. Freddie, however, didn't slow down. In 1985, he released his solo album Mr. Bad Guy. It was pure Freddie, no compromises, just his vision. He dedicated it to his beloved cats and filled it with dance beats, heartfelt ballads, and cheeky fun. Some fans embraced it, others didn't, and the US barely noticed. But for Freddie, it wasn't about the sales, it was about freedom. After years inside the Queen machine, he was finally doing things his way. Then, in a move no one expected, Freddie teamed up with opera legend Montserrat Cabal, one of his idols. They met in a hotel in Barcelona, where he played her a demo, singing her parts in falsetto. She was amazed. Together, they recorded Barcelona, a stunning blend of opera and rock. It was like nothing anyone had done before. When the song was chosen as the anthem for the 1992 Olympics, it became a global symbol. They even recorded a full album together, bold, strange, and beautiful, just like Freddie. Freddie Mercury knew time was running out. In early 1988, just months after being diagnosed with HIV, he returned to the studio with Queen. He kept his illness secret, refusing sympathy. He just wanted to sing. And somehow, despite the pain and fear, he gave it everything. The result was The Miracle, an album that didn't sound like a goodbye, but a triumph. It topped charts across Europe. Few knew it at the time, but it was miraculous in more ways than one. Then came Innuendo. By then, Freddie's body had weakened, but his voice was as powerful as ever. Brian May recalled Freddie telling the band to keep writing, no matter how sick he was. "You can finish it after I'm gone," he said. While he was still there, he gave them everything he had. The title track was bold, haunting, and brilliant, just like him. But in public, hiding the truth was getting harder. On February 18, 1990, Freddie appeared with Queen at the Brit Awards to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award. He spoke only 5 words: "Thank you. Good night." His frail appearance and silence said more than any speech. Back in the studio, Freddie kept recording. Some days, he could barely stand or sing more than an hour, but he showed up. Engineers said the sessions weren't sad, they were full of laughter. Freddie kept the mood light, refusing to let the darkness take over. When asked if he could handle the vocals for The Show Must Go On, he replied, "I'll do it, darling." He downed a glass of vodka and delivered a flawless take, one of the most powerful moments of his career. In May 1991, Freddie filmed his last music video, These Are the Days of Our Lives. It was shot in black and white to mask how sick he had become. Wearing a vest covered in drawings of his cats, he smiled and joked, doing take after take until he was satisfied. At the end of the video, he looked into the camera and whispered, "I still love you." It was his farewell. A few months later, in November, Freddie made his final choice. No more medication, just painkillers. He was ready for peace. His closest friends stayed by his side. Though he could no longer paint or see clearly, he still laughed and shared memories. On November 22nd, he asked Queen's manager to issue a public statement confirming he had AIDS. At 8 p.m., the news broke. At that very moment, lying in his bed, Freddie smiled. His assistant said it was the most relaxed he'd looked in years. The secret was out. The fight was almost over. Less than 24 hours later, on November 24, 1991, at 6:48 p.m., Freddie Mercury died. He was 45. The world lost not just a voice, but a legend, and the first rock star to openly die of AIDS at a time when the word alone sparked fear. His death forced the conversation into the open. It could no longer be ignored. But even in death, Freddie left behind a mystery. Everyone knew he was cremated at Kensal Green Cemetery in West London. But what happened to his ashes remained unknown. For over a year, they were unclaimed. Then, Mary Austin, his closest friend and former lover, quietly took them. She never revealed where she laid them to rest. In 2013, fans found a small hidden plaque at the cemetery. It bore his real name, birth and death dates, and a French inscription signed only with an M. It soon vanished, likely removed to preserve the secret. Freddie Mercury's final resting place remains unknown, just as he would have wanted, mysterious, untouchable, and unforgettable.